On her wedding day, Amma walked down the aisle with tears of joy in her eyes. The church was packed, the decorations were perfect, the groom was waiting at the altar. Everything was exactly how she had imagined it, except for one thing. The man she married was not the man she thought she was marrying, and she wouldn't discover the truth until 3 months later. Amma had spent 2 years planning her future with Nyamiche. Nyamiche was kind, successful, and respected in the community. The love story was the kind people admired, the kind people envied. When he proposed, she didn't hesitate. The wedding preparations began immediately. Invitations were printed, vendors were booked, families celebrated. Everything was going according to plan. What Amma didn't know was that Nyamiche had an identical twin brother named Nyamie. Most people knew about him, Amma didn't, and there was a reason for that. The twins had been separated for years after a serious disagreement. Nyamiche rarely mentioned him. When the topic came up, he simply said they were not close. Amma respected his privacy and never pushed for details. 3 weeks before the wedding, Nyamisha traveled to Kumasi for an important business deal. That was the last time Amma spoke to him. 3 days later, she received a phone call. Nyamisha had been involved in a terrible accident. He survived, but his injuries were serious. His family assured Amma that he would recover. However, they begged her not to visit immediately because he needed complete rest. Amma was worried, but she trusted them. Over the next few weeks, Nyamisha's messages became shorter. His calls became less frequent. He claimed he was recovering and preparing for the wedding. She believed him. Love has a way of making us trust even when things don't make sense. Finally, the wedding day arrived. Amma noticed something strange. Nyamiche seemed different. His voice sounded slightly deeper. He smiled less. He appeared more serious than usual. Whenever she mentioned certain memories, he seemed confused for a moment before responding. She blamed it on the accident. Everyone else seemed unconcerned, so she ignored her doubts. The ceremony went ahead. They exchanged vows, they kissed, and they became husband and wife. The first month of marriage was surprisingly peaceful. Nyamiye, pretending to be Nyamiche, treated Amma with kindness. In fact, he often seemed more attentive than the man she had dated. But small inconsistencies continued to appear. He suddenly preferred different foods. He forgot stories they had shared. He no longer liked certain movies he once claimed were his favorites. Whenever Amma pointed it out, he laughed it off. People change, he would say. Maybe he's right, or maybe something far bigger is happening. 3 months later, Amma was cleaning their bedroom when she discovered an old photo hidden inside a drawer. The picture showed Nyamiche, but beside him stood another man, a man who looked exactly like him. At first, she thought it was a mirror. Then she turned the photo over. Written on the back were two names, Nyamiche and Nyamie, brothers forever. Amma felt her heart skip. Why had nobody ever told her they were twins? That evening, she confronted her husband. The moment he saw the photograph, all the color disappeared from his face. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he sat down and began to cry. I am not Nyamiche. The words hit Amma like thunder. Her legs nearly gave way beneath her. What do you mean you are not Nyamiche? The man she has been living with for the past 3 months covered his face. My name is Nyamiye. Amma stared at him, waiting for him to laugh, waiting for him to admit it was a joke. But he didn't. Instead, he told her everything. The accident had been worse than everyone knew. Nyamiche had died instantly. The family was devastated. The wedding was only few weeks away. Guests had already arrived. Money had been spent. Plans had been finalized. Kofi's mother feared the shock would destroy Amma. In their grief, they made an unthinkable decision. They begged Nyamiye to take his brother's place until after the wedding. At first, he refused, but eventually, overwhelmed by guilt and pressure, he agreed. One day became 1 week, 1 week became 1 month, and before he realized, he was living a life that wasn't his. A life built on a lie. Amma could barely breathe. Everything she believed about her marriage had been stolen from her. The man she loved was gone. The man she trusted had deceived her. Every memory now felt contaminated. For days, she refused to speak to Nyamiye. She moved into the guest room. She avoided his calls. His apologies meant nothing. Nothing could undo what had happened. But grief has a strange way of revealing the truth. As the weeks passed, Amma remembered something. The kindness she experienced during those 3 months wasn't fake. The support wasn't fake. The care wasn't fake. The lies were real. But so were the feelings that had developed between them. And that realization frightened her more than anything. Because despite everything, she was beginning to understand that she no longer missed Nyamiche the way she once had. Her heart had quietly made room for someone else. The very man she believed she could never forgive. One evening, 6 months after the truth came out, Nyamiye packed his bags. "I think it's time for me to leave," he said. "You deserve a fresh start." Amma looked at him. For the first time in months, she saw not the man who lied to her, but the man who had spent every day trying to make things right. The man who carried guilt he could never erase. The man who had fallen in love with her while pretending to be someone else. As he reached for the door, Amma spoke. "Stay!" Nyamiye froze. Slowly, he turned around. Tears filled his eyes. "Why?" Amma smiled through her own tears. "Because for the first time since this began, I want to know the real you." A year later, they stood before family and friends once again. This time, there were no lies, no secrets, no hidden identities, just Amma and Nyamiye, two broken people who found love in the middle of tragedy. And this time, when they said "I do," they both knew exactly who they were marrying. What would you have done if you were Amma? Would you forgive Nyamiye or would you walk away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for the next love story. Bye!